Hi, welcome back. This is the second video in our series to introduce our first writing assignment. And for this particular one, we want to really begin the brainstorming and drafting process. So you really want to make sure that you've got what you need for this video, anything that you would need in order to take notes. You're also going to be stopping this video several times throughout to actually do some of the brainstorming activities. So you want to make sure that you've got what you need as we begin. Now, if you remember from the last video, we really had three guiding questions for these two videos. And those included, what is our first essay about? We covered that a lot in that first video. We'll loop back into it in this one. What is a vignette? And how do I begin drafting? So in this particular video, we're going to look back into what a vignette is, but we're actually going to do it through a process of some free writing idea generating activities that would allow you to then begin drafting your vignettes. So in order for us to really focus in on this process, we want to first understand our many identities. We're going to then begin to describe those identities, and then we'll think about collecting moments or scenes that were impactful in shaping that identity so that we can begin drafting each of those scenes that we choose. So the first thing we want to do is to create a list of our different identities. We all have many identities, and while they all make up who we are, what we want to do for this particular paper is really isolate one of those identities and how you define yourself in it, and really look at some different moments that help shape that identity. So an example is if I were to list out some of my identities, I might pick mother, I am a wife, I'm an educator, I'm also a student, I'm a thinker, I'm a problem solver. Now, this isn't all of them, but this is a start to this particular process. So in this first activity, what I want you to do is to stop the video. And for the next couple of minutes, I want you to just free write all of your identities that you can come up with. And again, you'll be from now until you continue drafting, you'll be thinking of different identities or different things. This is just to get the ideas flowing. So stop the video and take a 2-minute free write and just create a list similar to what you see on the screen here of your different identities. Now that you have those identities, what we want to do is to take that list and we want to list descriptive words that you would use to define yourself in that identity. So we've got these different identities. Now we want to define ourselves in that identity. So for example, if we go back to the list that I gave you, I said mother. I would describe myself just jotting down some words: clumsy, loving, protective, controlling. Those are all words I would use to describe who I am as a mom. As a wife, I would say I'm loving, difficult, I'm controlling. As an educator, I'm rigorous, I'm empathetic, I'm passionate. As a student, I'm curious, I'm nervous, and I'm passionate. As a thinker, I'd say I'm clumsy, I'm persistent, but I'm dedicated. And as a problem solver, I'm methodical and collaborative. So again, I took each of my identities and I just created some descriptive words that I would use to define myself in that particular identity. So now it's your turn. Once again, stop the video and this time take as long as you need and really go through each of the identities that you chose and just jot down some descriptive words that you would use to describe yourself in that identity. As you notice, I use the same word in different identities, right? Because we aren't siloed. We are one person. So I am a clumsy mom, but I'm also a clumsy thinker. And I use those words in both places to describe myself. So stop the video and look at your list and begin to write those descriptive words. Now that you have your list of identities and you have your descriptions, how you would use or what words you would use to define yourself in that. I want you to choose one identity that you would like to focus on for this paper and begin to think about impactful moments that help shape how you define yourself in that identity. And this particular process is going to take a little bit longer to do, so please take your time with it. Even though this is a quick video, I want you to feel free to take your time in um, writing down or thinking through those impactful moments. But just as an example to get you started, I went ahead and I chose mother, clumsy, loving, protective, controlling. And I go through a process of thinking about, the time I. And if I use that kind of phrase, it helps me think of those moments. So, for example, the time I called the doctor when my newborn daughter had a runny nose, the time I created a scavenger hunt so our kids could play a game finding their Easter baskets, the time I wouldn't allow my son to spend the night at a friend's house because I didn't know the friend or the parents. So, what I did was I took those different descriptions, clumsy, loving, protective, controlling, and I started to think about moments that I find impactful or that come to me as I think about how or what moments have shaped that identity. You're actually going to end up with four. Um, Whereas right here you see three, you're actually going to end up with four that will turn into vignettes. So now go ahead and stop the video and start creating those lists. Use the phrase the time I. Just in that drafting moment or that brainstorming moment may help you recall some of your memories. Now we're ready to kind of choose one of those scenes at a time. So if you have your four that you've isolated that you really want to focus on, and again, please take the time in this drafting process. Even though this video goes very quickly, it's meant to only be idea generating for you or perhaps a process that might help you in that. In no way, shape, or form should you complete this brainstorming process in the time of watching this video. So it's really meant to set up kind of a model for the brainstorming. So if you've chosen your scenes or the things that you really want to focus on, then you can begin drafting. So for example, I chose mother. And again, my description's clumsy, loving, protective, controlling. And the scene that I'm going to start with, because I'm going to only focus on one vignette at a time. Remember, they don't need to be connected. You don't need to transition from one to the other. They're separate scenes. I'm going to focus on the time I called the doctor when my newborn daughter had a runny nose. That's an impactful moment that comes to mind when I think of myself as a mom. So a draft example might look something like this. You notice that I have a subtitle. My subtitle says, I broke her. That's the subtitle. And my vignette in the draft process looks something like this. I can't believe it. Our firstborn has been home with me for a total of 72 hours, and I have already broken her. She went to sleep just a few hours ago completely fine, and now she has some clear goo coming out of her nose, and I can't get it to stop running. She seems frustrated that I can't fix this for her. She squirms as I try to use that horrendous squishy bulb thingy they gave me in the hospital. I don't know what to do. She's too young for medicine. How could she possibly be sick? She has been home with me since she came home from the hospital. I fight back the urge to completely break down as I nervously dial the phone number for our pediatrician. All I keep thinking is, how could I have already failed as a parent? The nurse answers my call. Her calming voice and lighthearted tone lets me know that I didn't break our daughter and that what she was experiencing is completely normal. She also tells me that this is the first of many moments that I will feel like an inadequate parent. Boy, was she ever right. So you see what I've done is walk through that process of listing those identities, describing myself in that identity, then coming up with or thinking about impactful moments that help to define myself in that identity, and then isolating that one moment. You notice this is just this entire thing, the phone call. This took was a period of time of, less than 15, 20 minutes. And yet you see that in this moment, you can kind of sense my inadequacy or my um, fear of failure, or that I have somehow harmed my daughter. The subtitle, I broke her, right, kind of embodies what this particular scene is doing. So my vulnerability as a mom is hopefully coming out in this. And again, this is a draft, right? This is the first time I'm putting something down. So I would take it from here and move it forward, go back into it, put it away for a day or two, come back, and take a look and see what else I might want to add. You're going to go through this process with each of the 4 vignettes that you do. Now you'll notice mine is only 1 paragraph. That does not mean that your vignettes are only 1 paragraph. That's a function for how you write them, right? So a vignette does not equal 1 paragraph. A vignette could be 3 paragraphs. It could be 5 paragraphs. It could be 2 paragraphs. I merely made this very short um, as an example for you. So now it's your turn to begin drafting the vignettes when you get to that point. Now that you've seen an example of the process for brainstorming and drafting your vignettes, it's your turn to begin. Walk back through this video as many times as you would like. Remember, this is a draft. You are just trying to get your ideas down on paper. Have fun with your ideas and let your creativity flow. The next steps are just to begin brainstorming and drafting your vignettes. Remember, this is the body of our first essay. So it is not meant to have an introduction and conclusion at this point. We will focus on that introduction and conclusion next week. We want to really get and zero in and focus on these vignettes first. Thank you for watching. Now you can head back to Canvas and continue this week's module.